What's good people, and welcome back to the channel here on Crewboy Productions. My name is BK, and this is the Silly, Nerdy, and Wordy Podcast, episode number 76. And in this episode, I'll be telling you my review of the Broadway production of Les Misérables, as I have just seen it on stage, live and in person on Thursday, July 17th, 2025. What's going on, everybody? I hope everybody is doing very, very well. Glad to be back doing another episode. And thank you for all the subscribers for watching and listening. Thank you for all the listeners on all podcast platforms. And thank you for all the new listeners here on Spotify. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And thank you for those that are new here. And so I'll be going into the Broadway production of Les Misérables, Les Mis, as I have just seen it. This is the playbill that I received after entering the theater. I have many of these. I've seen over 50 Broadway plays, productions, musicals, and so this is one of my favorite things that I love to go and see in person. Excited to talk about it. Let me know in the comments, what are some of your favorite plays, Broadway productions? Maybe you like some of the big ones, some of the smaller ones. Have you ever seen the show? Let me know. Some of my favorites are The Lion King, Hamilton, In the Heights, Beauty and the Beast, just to name a few. I could keep going, but let's get into this story, Les Mis. It is a powerful Broadway production set in 19th century France, following the character of Jean Valjean, his journey of redemption from prisoner to factory owner to a mayor of a town in France, and it just follows him all. This play follows him all through his life. He's doing this, trying to live his life, all while being pursued by Inspector Javier, and he meets some people along the way. So I'll get into the story a bit and also weaving how this is looking on and sounding on stage with the technical aspects of it as well. And so this play starts off as the characters on a boat, and they're rowing and they're in chains, so they're prisoners, and they eventually get the France, and then Jean Valjean is released on parole, being on parole for 19 years for stealing bread and subsequently trying to escape. So he's trying to live his life. Now, in terms of this story and how it looks on stage, took me a while to really get into it because the beginning was a bit confusing after the fact to realize that the first 20 minutes was a prologue, and then you see the name of the show on the stage. So that little bit took me out of it some. But once that finished and then it got going. But overall, I liked the show. There was a lot of story beats with different characters, but also still focusing on Jean Valjean's story. And one thing that was really different and unique for me that I've never seen in all the shows I've seen was the entire show of this Broadway play was done in song. In terms of all of the dialogue, it was done in song with the exception of a few moments, one-word pieces of dialogues that happen a couple bits throughout the show. So what that means is that all the dialogue, whether they're having a conversation, whether they are fighting, whether they are arguing, whatever the case may be, they are singing it in song throughout the entire show, 98% of the show. And that also means that the orchestra is continuously playing throughout the show. Now, normally you go in and out of song, you're in song and then you're in regular dialogue with no music. But in this case, there's music and they're singing throughout the entire show. So just the first show that I've seen that is like that. I'm sure there are many like that. So the orchestra had to continuously play, which means they didn't really get too much of a break, with the exception of those one-word pieces of dialogue that happen very few times during the show, as well as just transitioning in between songs. And then, of course, getting the intermission after Act 1. But otherwise, they were continuously playing. So props to the orchestra and everyone involved in the orchestra to do that continuously for the length of this show. And the company overall, they sounded really good. Really enjoyed how they sounded together as a company. Their harmonies were crisp. They were together. There were a few rounds. They were great. There were multiple performances where it was just one actor on stage having to sing his or her way through a scene, and they all did a great job. So really enjoyed them. One person in particular I want to point out that really stood out to me was Christian Mark Gibbs. Christian Mark Gibbs, he played the character of Enrolhas, which was Hugh Jackman's character in the movie of Les Mis. But whenever he was singing, it just really stood out. He was just excellent every single time, as well as the entire company. And there were other great individual performances, but he just sticks out in my mind from seeing the show. So really, really great for him. And in terms of this show, another thing I wanted to point out is the set production in terms of how these sets were built and the transition of sets in and out of sets, very smooth. In terms of some of these sets were low, some of them were tall in between, and the way they transition. So props to the stagehands for doing that. Of course, that requires a lot of rehearsal prior to seeing the show live. So great job with that as well. Another thing is in the second act, particularly the lighting of the show, the way it was done for different scenes. I really like how that was done for multiple scenes, multiple sets, as well as the sound effects and the lighting once the battle was happening in the second act. The battle with the June Rebellion of 1832, with the young revolutionaries and the French monarchy and the government troops. With that happening, it was also sad as well, but that was just an interesting way, but exciting as well, with the sound effects and the magic of the lighting on stage as it was happening live. And then that's the story just continuing with Jean Valjean trying to live his life, still being pursued. And one of the things that he's did throughout his life, he had this factory that he eventually became the owner of. And then he meets this woman, Fatine, and then she gets fired, but he steps in to help her. And then we fast forward, Fatine gets sick. She's set to promise him to find her daughter and save her daughter, take care of her daughter, and which is what he did. He took care of her and kept that promise. And so he continued to do that through the girl growing up to be an adult. And so he did that until his dying day, but he still continued to be pursued by that inspector. But this was just an interesting story. It was a little bit heartbreaking as well, particularly the battle when everyone eventually passed away in the battle. And then another thing I want to point out is there wasn't much choreography on stage, but there was one particular part where there was marching in stance, everybody marching together in a formation and moving forward slowly. But there were also a few people weaving in and out of the formation while people were still moving forward. But the majority of the group had to maintain the formation while other people was going in and out. So that took a lot of coordination, a lot of choreography, a lot of rehearsal, doing that in a rehearsal space and then doing it on stage. Very good job in how all of that came together as they were doing that on stage, and they were singing while doing that. So excellent job by the cast doing that. Another thing I wanted to point out was going back to the music with the orchestra. I noticed that the conductor is an African-American male, Glenn Alexander II. I haven't seen a lot of African-American conductors when going to Broadway shows, at least in my experience. And so just seeing that was a pleasant surprise. And of course, he did an excellent job having to continuously conduct throughout the entire show for the majority, except for the few moments and the intermission. But it's just nice to see that. So I just wanted to give him a shout out. Again, the conductor for the show that I saw on July 17th, 2025, Glenn Alexander II. So great job by him and what he did with the orchestra leading them. So those were some of the things I want to talk about, as well as the stage transitions with the sets, as well as the choreography. The singing was excellent. So I enjoyed the show. Would I go see it again? I think so. Now that I have a good understanding of it, I think I'll be able to follow it more. So I liked the show, and just the singing was excellent. And that is pretty much all I have to say for this Broadway production, as it was my first time seeing this show. And I also have another Broadway production that I did talk about back in 2023 on an audio-only version of which was MJ the Musical, Michael Jackson the Musical. I have that available here on the channel. I will link it in the description. You can check that out as well. So I hope I was able to provide you with some value here as I talked about this Broadway play. The next one I have coming up is in October with The Sound of Music, which I am very familiar with as I have seen that play multiple times and the movie multiple times. But hope you've enjoyed what I have here. And if you do, subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and let me know in the comments, have you seen a Broadway play? If so, what are some of your favorite Broadway plays? Are you going to see one later on this year? Let me know in the comments. Let me know in a review as well. For those of you that are listening, definitely check me out on all podcast platforms. Just search for the Silly, Nerdy, and Wordy podcast. That is all I'm going to have for you today. So until next time, we will talk soon.